I think now a CEO of a major streaming service or TV service needs to understand really what his consumers are looking to consume. It's no longer a one-size-fits-all. And I think that's the challenge of a lot of these global tech companies, is that where companies regionally can differentiate versus the sort of the Netflixes and the Prime Video is to try and really capture that local consumption behavior.
In this podcast, we're going to be stimulating your mind when it comes to taking a new approach towards not only what people in the market want, us as consumers, but what organizations need to interpret when it comes to the first-party data that they collect about us as people to create an optimized platform. And then finally, what it does in terms of being able to take a really productive posture to the broadcasters that need to evolve the way they address their market, but need the blend of the people data, the subjective, as well as the objective data to create a really advantageous position. To help me in this conversation, I've got Sam Sweet, the head of strategic pursuits at Synamedia. And Sam, your background lends itself perfectly to being able to have this conversation. Welcome to the podcast again.
Thanks, Chris. Lovely to be here.
I'm looking forward to this chat with you, Sam. I think that your role as CEO at Think, as well as a number of the other things that you've done and the relationships that you've got around the world, will mean that we can have a really interesting chat here. First of all, let's start with the people, the consumers. Designing for people, not platforms. If you think about what happened pre-COVID, crystallized in COVID when everybody became familiar with platforms and there's a real bounce in our market. At that point, people didn't know what they didn't know. So whenever they came across a streaming platform, it was new, it was innovative. You know, the carousel format was something different to what they were familiar with. Now everybody's familiar with that. And not only that, people have become social media experts, very fluent on it. They know what the variations are in how they can interact and consume with content. Where does that leave the OTT vendor market when it comes to building for people, not just building platforms?
It's a much more mature market now, and the expectation is much higher in terms of delivering the right content to the consumer. What we need to do now is really understand the behavior and the consumption trends of these households, of these individuals. And we can only do that with first-party data. So I think the whole evolution now and landscape is changing towards being really context aware to what consumers want to be watching and get them to that content really quickly. So first-party data is really changing the landscape.
Yeah. It's interesting as well because I can see lots of different brands at different levels, you know, the hero brands, Synamedia, etc., at the top of our market, experimenting with different things this year, really taking a very clear a clear posture in the market around what their platform provides for consumers. But also, you know, as I said, consumers know what they want in terms of swiping, vertical, you know, it's generationally orientated as well. Where I'm going with this, Sam, is that I guess the conversations and the interaction that your potential customers want to have with you is one of value. How can you help me understand what I might not yet know about what my market wants?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think now a CEO of a major streaming service or TV service needs to understand really what his consumers are looking to consume. And I think really getting that first-party data in a way that can be analyzed, and more importantly, putting that context-aware signals into the experience drives differentiation. If you know that sort of consumption's changing from one day to the next in that household, you can start to get really intelligent about the type of content. It's no longer a one-size-fits-all. And I think that's the challenge of a lot of these global tech companies, is that where companies regionally can differentiate versus the sort of the Netflixes and the Prime Video is to try and really capture that local consumption behavior. And there's a lot you can do with first-party data, but again, capturing that data in a way that you can actually do something with it is a key part.
I think you have got, as a particular role as CEO of a well-known data organization that features in the chronology of your experience. Let's talk then more about this first-party data, because you probably are unable to talk about specific examples of where you've led projects where the input of that data has been strategically massively important to their evolution. But what's your take on how the blend of the desire in broadcasters to create people-first platforms and then that first-party data, how do those two things come together?
Yeah, well, of course, you've got the consideration of GDPR and some of the privacy concerns in each market. So you have to find a way to work with that. But on the basis that you can get access to that first-party data and you can start to look at the consumption patterns. For example, one household from one week to the next may all of a sudden start watching programs about babies. And then you can start to think, oh, well, maybe that household is about to have, a baby. And you can start to look at all the potential e-commerce advertising opportunities that come with that intelligence, that understanding. And I think generally people are although there's a lot of concern about what information is being shared, if you have an experience that's beneficial to the consumer, to the individual, as to what consumption behavior and what they would like to be watching, I think it creates a better experience all around. And so I think really the next wave of intelligence gathering is really trying to harness that understanding of what's happening in a household, what they're consuming, and be able to tailor that experience and provide personalization around that.
That single word that you've just used, Sam, understanding, I think is the difference that makes the difference. Because I remember a podcast 3 years ago now with Geronimo McCanus from Jump. He spoke in that podcast a lot about the fact that even then 3 years ago, and now even more so, the availability of data is huge. It's the interpretation and the understanding of that data that makes it valuable. And I don't know what you think, but I can imagine that a lot of organizations see the horizon of data that's available and are just intimidated by it. Like, where the hell do we start with this?
Yeah, and I think this touches upon a very important consideration, is that there is a lot of data that exists in these organizations, but they're very siloed. And so part of the thinking and the thought process, particularly that I'm hearing, and I'm sure Nick and Ricardo are hearing at that executive level, is what are the things that need to change in my organization so I can get access to that data in a way that makes me understand more about my customer. And bringing that together, that organizational maybe structuring to enable that whatever chief data officer, chief AI officer to get access to the right level of first-party data from the various different parts of the organization. Bring that all together under one hat is, I think, part of the consideration for the future in terms of organizational design.
My mind goes towards a question around, so how do you package it up? Because obviously, just walk into a boardroom and say, just give us all your data or we'll interpret it and, then we'll leave the brochure with you. What does it do in terms of being able to create what you could call the tip of the spear in terms of a next generation approach to within the sales life cycle, I suppose?
Yeah, you touch on an interesting point, which is you have to be, if you want a company like Synamedia, for example, to come in and help advise them, you have to be comfortable sharing that data. I think generally in my experience, certainly in my last 3-4 years of experience, the appetite of customers to be able to share data so that the vendor community can provide recommendations as to how to effectively grow their subscribers and provide more compelling content is there. So I don't think that's a consideration. But like you said, it's how to package that in a way that actually makes it meaningful. And that's part of what I see as the next phase is I think that we've got to go through maybe a certain level of learning as to what we've learned from experiences in the past and how to put in place the right strategy in the future. And that's why, for example, we have advisory services with Synamedia to really help our customers understand what's the best way forward in terms of driving that data first approach.
Yeah, that is super interesting to hear, because if you look at some of the large consulting brands in the global space, now Accenture springs to mind, but there are others, they are absolutely 100% on the competitive horizon when it comes to Synamedia and your competitors now. I guess they are coaching, counseling, advising, even running the procurement life cycles for what really well-known broadcasters are making decisions on now.
Absolutely, Chris. I think this is the opportunity for Synamedia is to really, I was having a conversation recently with one of our potential customers talking about the advisory capability that Synamedia has. And what's interesting from a Synamedia standpoint, differentiating from some of the other maybe non-technology, non-specific competence in TV is our experience in doing this. And in fact, we used to do this. I've rejoined Synamedia. So I used to be at Synamedia when it was back in the day before we got acquired by Cisco, and through that transition into Cisco. And we were doing a lot of project advisory services for our customers, helping them understand how best, not just advising on the business aspects of what they needed to execute on, but the technology and implementation plans. So what Synamedia can do is actually take it from concept and advisory from the boardroom into actual implementation. And if you want, let us implement it on your behalf.
So my interpretation of what you've just said is, if you take where we started this conversation, the people side of things, the subjective desire to make sure that the audience is satisfied and how to encapsulate that at step 2 is best at least complemented, if not done, through also looking at the data. And then in a commercial context, all of that is crystallized really with what I would see as a professional services type of approach. It feels like what you're saying is that Synamedia has kind of pulled all of that together and is now got a credible posture to be able to go into the sales lifecycle in a maybe a rejuvenated way if you were doing it when you were at Synamedia before, but a new way for this chapter of at least what Synamedia Go has done historically.
Yes. And dare I say, putting your money where your mouth is and being able to actually go into a customer and say, look, this is what we recommend you should do. But we'll walk the talk. We'll actually take you on that journey. We'll help you go through that process. And if at the end of the day, you want a build, operate, transfer model where we build and operate in the short term and then transfer, we can also be flexible in that type of dialogue as well. So it gives all the different scenarios. But what it comes down to at its core is making sure that we're building data-centric, data-first TV experiences that C-levels can really ensure they can measure, manage, and operate in a way that gives them the agility, particularly as we've seen so many things are changing so quickly now. This whole area of AI over the last, 2-3 years, Chris? I mean, you've been talking about this for some years now, is tremendous, the amount of change we've seen. Yeah. And so operating at speed and at scale is where I see Synamedia operating now.
Do you think that might be one of the biggest competitors to this approach? If somebody, let's say a CTO, thinks, why do we need Synamedia or Sam to come in and give us this advice? We can use deep research on ChatGPT, just upload all the files. Is AI a risk to this?
Well, this is the big debate. Is AI replacing people like me and you, in terms of what we do? No. I think that there was someone that talked about, you shouldn't be worried about AI. You should be worried about the people that can operate AI more effectively than you. And so I think that is the key consideration, is really understanding how you can use AI to make better decisions, to make them faster, to reduce the time it takes to, for example, implement workflows. The big advantage with agentic AI is this ability to execute workflows very, very quickly, to execute coding very, very quickly. So it still doesn't change the need for oversight, still doesn't change to some extent the need for human in the loop. So I don't believe that's gonna change anytime soon.
Final question, Sam. Do you think that, I'm trying to word this correctly, but I feel like the stars have to align for a business to have real conviction about the kind of approach that we're talking about, that professional services approach. You need to understand all of the different things in terms of how you capture it, how you interpret it, how you crystallize that, how you build it into what you present back as the intellectual property. The potential customer or person that you're sharing that with, at least, receives that. Is it a moment in Synamedia's history that's distinctly special by you being in a position to be able to confidently talk to me about the ability to do this?
Yeah, look, I think the great advantage Synamedia has, and that it's kept over these years, is so much best-in-class experience in so many different workflows of the TV business. And being able to design and bring those together has been a strength of Synamedia for 10, 15 years. What we need to do better is do it quicker and faster, and operating obviously at scale, but in a way that's more agile. And I think what you're seeing now with Synamedia Go is this ability to deliver complete end-to-end really quickly and also migrate and add features in a way that is fast. And I think that's the key thing, is to continually have that operational agility and that efficiency as we move into the next phase of TV.
I can see another layer of value in what you're talking about as well, Sam, in that once you get sufficient critical mass around the world in a number of those projects, the granularity that you've got in terms of understanding of what's happening can then be fed back into the R&D and innovation life cycle to continually evolve these projects, not just for one potential customer, but for the market. It's a
And
position.
Synamedia has over 80 large customers, and there's so much experience. Sometimes we don't even realize how much experience we have about, the market and about what works, what doesn't work. And these are the type of experiences we want to share and work with our customers with, to really give them the best opportunity to differentiate.
Interesting. I will be watching with fascination and hope that it's successful for you, Sam. It certainly feels as though the kind of topic where you've got enough experience to bring it to life. And I know there's a number of other pretty awesome people in the team as well. So I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Chris. Been a pleasure.